right, welcome to the last lecture for Unit 7. As usual, I want to start with our weekly outline. As you guys can see, this week we have a short week and we are virtual this week, which means that your virtual classes, all of your classes will be on Zoom. Your in-person times are when you should attend. Those are listed in the email that I sent you, the This Week in U.S. History. Wednesday schedule is the same schedule as usual. Those links are also in the email. Your assignments this week, you have this video to watch, which is going to help you do your journal. There are 5 readings, I believe, for this week. Make sure you include a reaction on the video, your notes, and the summaries, reactions to the readings in that journal. Wednesday, we will follow our normal schedule. Please attend either section. Those Zoom links are in your email. You also have a document activity for this week on the progressive presidents, as that is the topic that we are covering in this lecture as well. Friday is a busy day. Friday, you have your short paper due for Unit 7 that has been posted for the past 3 weeks. I want to make sure that you know that it is due by 11:59. Please be sure to look back at the comments. Make sure that you're writing this in an essay format. In order to score above a D, you need to write more than 350 words. Please go back and look at that rubric to score as high as you can on it. If you want me to look it over, please let me know. Some of you have already sent it to me. Thank you for that. Any questions on that, let me know. Your unit exam is going to be posted on Friday. That starts at 8. It will end at 11:45. This one's formatted a little bit differently. You have 40 multiple choice and 2 extended responses. Make sure you look over the study guide that was sent to you in your email as well. All right, that is enough housekeeping for this week. Let's get to our topic. We only have one section left in the notes, so I will keep this as short as possible. Today we are going over the progressive presidents to wrap up our progressive era. This time that we've been talking about has encompassed much political reform, economic reform, social reform, and we need to look at the presidents that were leading the time period and remember, before this time period, there was a gap between the Civil War up until the Progressive Era where we saw presidents taking the back seat. We saw presidents allowing Congress to take the reins. We saw that because the people were losing trust in the office of the presidency. That started with the compromise of 1877 when we saw Hayes come in, not really being chosen by the vote of the people, but instead being chosen by a committee out of a deal with the South to end Reconstruction. And then we saw Grant with the whiskey ring. And between those two presidencies, the people really start to lose trust in the office. And at that point, we enter into the stage of the lost presidents, where we don't really know their names because in history they didn't do much. At that point, they weren't working towards making reform, which led to all the problems of the Gilded Age when the government was hands off, not controlling big business, allowing the economy to grow, which enters us into the period that we're talking about now. This turn of the presidency, this turn of what the role of the president in social issues and economic issues came to be. And we have to start with the best president. I wouldn't say that he's my favorite, like he's definitely top 5, but he is, I guess he would be top 3. Regardless, Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy coming, the teddy bear coming from Teddy Roosevelt. The nickname there, Teddy. He is a specimen of a man. Okay, he comes from a wealthy family. He's gonna take on the wealthy class. Full of contradictions here. When he's young, he has these super thick glasses. He's super unhealthy, but again, becoming a fitness nut, always wanting to be outside. He goes to Harvard. He writes over 20 books. He becomes very active in his community. But all the while, he becomes known and gets this kind of aura around him of being this strong uh, political figure, social figure, economic figure, and anything he really sets his mind to, he gets. He wants to be healthy, even knowing he has poor eyesight and asthma, and he becomes this very stocky man that enters Harvard wanting to be the most educated, goes to Harvard, writes over 20 books, and he finds a woman there that he falls in love with, beautiful woman that he says he'd never be able to get. He ends up marrying her, although their tragic love story is pretty sad. He enters the political scene as a New York State assemblyman, but then his life is hit with tragedy, where his wife dies in childbirth on the same day that his mother passes away, and after that he retires from politics. But he cannot stay away for long. He will enter back into politics. He will remarry. He will come in and serve on the New York State Board of Police as the commissioner president. He will become the Secretary of the Navy under McKinley for McKinley's first term. He will leave office to go and serve in the Spanish American War, leading a volunteer regiment of the Rough Riders. And then, after the Spanish American War, he returns to politics as the governor of New York. Now, this is important that we note that he is the governor of New York, because as governor, this is where Teddy really gets his political clout. He takes on big business in the industrial capital of the United States. He takes on the political machines. He faces it head on and calls out industry for what they were doing. And because of this, he becomes a notable figure in politics. He becomes known as one who will not shy away from a challenge. And because of that, he becomes the vice president to McKinley in 1900. Now, when he becomes the vice president to McKinley, the office of the vice president had pretty much been used for nothing. Notice we haven't mentioned any vice presidents up until this point, okay? Except for when there was an assassination and they became president or the president died. But here, the party strategically chose Roosevelt because of his actions as the governor of New York. When he gets put on the ticket with McKinley, he is known as someone who is going to ruffle feathers. They knew that putting Teddy on the ticket would intimidate big business, which is exactly what needed to happen at the turn of the century here, which is why you see in this political cartoon, you see the trusts there, but on the poster you see McKinley very small and Roosevelt very big, drawing the attention of the monopolies of the trusts, and really making this move in politics that we are now changing. The government is not going to continue to support big business. We're bringing in the big guns with Teddy Roosevelt. Now, McKinley is going to be assassinated, and when he is assassinated, Roosevelt, of course, becomes president. Now, there's kind of a political game we were playing here. Big business thought that putting Teddy as the vice president would make him be quiet, put him in a position in politics where he could not do much. But no one had anticipated that McKinley would get assassinated, and when he does, the worst nightmare of monopolies becomes true, and now they have an enemy in the presidency. Roosevelt is going to use his office as what we call a bully pulpit. A pulpit is a raised platform at a church where a preacher delivers their sermon. A bully pulpit is a position that provides an opportunity to speak out and be listened to. This term is going to be coined by Roosevelt himself, who refers to his own office as a bully pulpit, in which he's meaning to use his platform to advocate an agenda. And his agenda is to work against big business. He's going to be challenged by the congressional powers. He's not going to be accepted at first as this person who wants to break up big business because this is a change of the tides. Up until this point, we had not seen any president or Congress take on big business. He is going after the trusts, and he will get the nickname that we will talk about in just a second, Teddy the Trust Buster. He explains that there is a violent revolution on the horizon. He will take care of the working class, the laborers, at all costs. He will use the office of the president to take care of the average person in the United States, which was the absolute worst case scenario for the monopolies here. Teddy the Trust Buster. When Teddy comes into the presidency, his only piece of legislation that he has to use at his disposal to break up these monopolies, these trusts, is the Sherman Antitrust Act. Now remember, the Sherman Antitrust Act had said that you cannot as a trust, as a monopoly, interfere with trade, interstate commerce, that trade across state lines. Now, of course, we know that if you're in business, you want to trade. So, of course, you're not going to be restricting trade, especially not trade that is across the nation. So, the Sherman Antitrust Act is a paper tiger. It was only for a show on paper to make it look like the government was doing something, taking action. But in reality, there was no use of this piece of legislation. On top of this, the Supreme Courts typically sided with big business throughout these skirmishes between big business and the workers. The Supreme Court typically would take the side of big business. We saw that in the case of In re Debs, where the Supreme Court upheld the government's intervention in these labor strikes. So it really was an uphill battle here to try to use the Sherman Antitrust Act to try to break up these big businesses because nobody was on the side of breaking up the monopolies. Until Teddy Roosevelt takes on J.P. Morgan in the case of U.S. versus Northern Securities Company. Now, the Northern Securities Company was a railroad monopoly. We were seeing J.P. Morgan consolidate another railroad line where if this merger were allowed to happen, the competition in the Transcontinental Railroad would essentially be eliminated. Morgan would have had control over the railroads across the United States. Now, we can figure that railroads are used for trade. They are used for interstate commerce. And if one person owned the majority stake in the railroads across the United States and they were setting rates that hindered interstate commerce, well, that, my friends, is a violation, a direct violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And Teddy Roosevelt knew this. So he demands that his Department of Justice takes on and breaks up the Northern Securities Company using the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is the first time the Sherman Antitrust Act was successfully used to actually break up a trust as it was intended to do. And it gets Teddy the nickname Trust Buster. Now, the political cartoon that you see, you can see that Teddy, the ever avid hunter, which a lot of his hunts were staged. We won't get into that. But because I love him, we look at the political cartoon here and we see Teddy hunting down the bad trusts, but capturing the good trusts, allowing them to live another day. When we look at this here, it's really portraying this idea that Roosevelt would categorize trusts or monopolies as good or bad. Businesses could be positive when practicing fairly. So he says that good monopolies allow for some competition, don't set prices that would hurt the market, practice good business And then there are the bad trusts that set high rates and exploit the consumer. And he says these are the ones that will come under attack. These are the trusts that will be busted up using the Sherman Antitrust Act. So Teddy again, he proves his word that he will go after big business if he deems them dangerous to the consumer, dangerous to the people. Teddy, as no surprise, if he's taking on these trusts, these monopolies, Teddy will fall on the side of the workers when it comes time to step in and intervene. In the past, though, when there have been strikes, when there have been any uh, any violent interactions between labor unions and management, or workers and management, presidents have strategically sided themselves with the big business. President Hayes does it with the railroads in the Great Railroad Strike of 1877 when he sends in federal troops to break up the strike. Grover Cleveland did it with the Pullman strike when he again sends in federal troops to stop the strike in 1894. So we have a history of the federal government falling on the side of big business, again, because the government wanted to allow the economy to continue to grow. They didn't want to ruffle any feathers. They don't want to step in the way of these big industrialists. So they, instead of helping the average worker get those bread and butter issues of fair wages, shorter hours, and safer conditions, they will step in on the side of big business and squash these outbreaks of workers against management. But Teddy in 1902 is going to change the tides yet again. In 1902, coal miners in Pennsylvania are going to go on strike demanding better pay, and this draws the attention of Teddy. Roosevelt is going to meet with the miners' union leader and the owner of the mines to try to negotiate a settlement and end this strike. Now, this is when Teddy does something that hadn't been done before. Teddy is going to threaten to send in federal troops, which had been done, but he says these federal troops are going to take control of the coal mines and with federal employees, and the federal government will seize this coal mine if they do not pay these workers better. So instead of saying, I'm sending federal troops in, we will arrest all of the strikers, we'll stop the strike, Teddy says, no, the federal government will seize this mine and it will not be yours anymore if you don't give these workers what they demand. So Teddy's interference here is going to force the mine owners to give the workers a small pay raise, and they reduce their hours to a 9-hour workday, making it the first time a president has interfered in a conflict between unioners and management on the side of workers, which is amazing. In the political cartoon that you see here, you see Teddy at the top of the mountain on a horse, depicting him as a Rough Rider, which was the regiment that he led in the Spanish-American War, lassoing the threatened coal strike and bringing it up, stopping that strike, and really showing his willingness to go out and help the worker, showing that he is not going to side with these big businesses. He will recognize the workers and what they need. Teddy is going to go on to continue to advocate for the workers through his Department of Commerce and Department of Labor. He is going to change this meaning of the federal government always siding with big business, and that is huge because this is the worst nightmare that the monopolies had when Teddy became the vice president. McKinley potentially not being able to serve out that second term, and he is proving to be worthy of his platform, of that bully pulpit where he is advocating it and carrying through for the working class. Now, Teddy is going to have what we call the square deal. Okay, we are going to start to see these legislative packages coming with presidents from here on out. We're going to hear the Square Deal. We'll hear the New Deal. We'll hear the Fair Deal. We are going to hear these reform packages of legislations made by presidents to really last throughout their legacy. And the Square Deal is a program of reforms that Teddy is going to put together in order to reform the working class, reform the working conditions, reform the United States as a whole. But let's back up a little bit. In 1907, Congress is going to pass a law that blocked the president from protecting additional territory in 6 of the western states. In typical Teddy fashion, he's going to sign a bill into law, but not before protecting 16 million acres in those states. So Teddy says, yeah, I'll pass the law proposed by Congress, but before I do so, I am going to protect all of the lands that I want to protect beforehand. And this really goes to speak to the political cartoon that we see on the page here. Teddy is going to be a huge advocate for the conservation of the environment. And here we see on the poster it is written, "Protect and preserve the remaining forests upon public lands from devastation and destruction, which have been the fate of those in forest sections across the country." He is labeled as a practical forester, a subject that had attention all through Mr. Roosevelt's presidency. Teddy is going to be an advocate for protecting national lands. He will begin to protect the national forests, outlining the land protected by the government. He puts together the Sierra Club, which was meant to protect the wilderness, dedicated to saving the wilderness. So we have Teddy to thank for the national parks that we see, the protection of the national parks. And he really begins this idea that we need to take care of the land that we have acquired. We worked so hard to spread the United States from coast to coast, but we haven't worked to protect the land from ourselves. And during this time, it's not that they had the science that we have today where we can understand what we do to the environment, but he recognized that as people were industrializing, as we were eating up all of this territory, we did need to protect some and preserve some for the future. Now, Roosevelt's programs of reforms to keep the wealthy and the powerful from taking advantage of the poor are going to be known as the Square Deal. If you say to someone, we are square, we are even, right? So that's where the idea of the Square Deal comes from. Within the Square Deal, we are going to see some of the reforms that we talked about in the last lecture. This is going to include the Meat Inspection Act, it will include the Pure Food and Drug Act, but it also includes the Newlands Reclamation Act, which encouraged settlement of lands that required irrigation, so pushing people to lands that were less desirable and building, setting up irrigation to those lands to get people moving to places we hadn't seen before. Teddy is not going to seek a third term, okay? He is going to pass the torch and leave the office. Teddy was an incredibly popular president because of the actions that he took to help the working class, to challenge big business, and he gains the support of many. And when Teddy chooses a successor, whoever he tapped to be the president was going to become the president hands down with his blessing. So Teddy Roosevelt is going to pick his best friend, William Howard Taft, to be his successor. Taft is going to easily win with the support of Roosevelt, and Roosevelt is going to retire on a world tour. He's going to say peace out. After changing the presidency to become a more active president, to be the first president to travel travel outside of the country, he will win the Nobel Peace Prize. He really left his mark, and he says, okay, it's time to retire. I'm leaving my legacy in the hands of my best friend. I can retire, go on an African safari, and Taft will continue my work. I would love to say that that's exactly what happened, but based on the image that you can see there, Taft doesn't do exactly what Teddy asked him to do. He does all of the opposite things. So you can see that Taft is walking in Teddy's footsteps for sure, but he's walking the wrong way. Taft is going to pass the Payne-Aldrich tariff, which we know that tariffs help big business. They encourage American manufacturing. That is the government stepping on the side of big business again, falling into bad habits. This is going to draw the attention of Teddy. Now, what Teddy cannot let slide by is what Taft does to the Division of Forestry. Taft is going to fire the leader of the Division of Forestry and replace them with someone that opposed all of Roosevelt's conservation efforts. Now, Teddy, he loved the environment. He loved the national forest. He loved the government protecting the wilderness. And when Taft takes this step to not only go back to siding with big business and encouraging trusts in the United States, to destroying his legacy in the Division of Forestry, Teddy says, okay, that's it. I guess I can never retire from politics, and he will come back. Now, at this time, there was no limit to the presidency. We do not have term limits on the presidency yet. So, when it comes time for the election of 1912, Taft is going to be the incumbent. He will win the Republican nomination. Hands down, no challenge whatsoever. Teddy, though, challenged Taft for the Republican nomination, and he did not win it. So instead, Teddy says, I am going to run on my own political platform. I am going to run as the Progressive Party. And when he runs as the Progressive Party nominee, he runs on the ideas of direct election of senators, women's suffrage, reduction of the tariff, and many other social reforms that he says he carried out in the Square Deal and wants to continue, pushing for a society based on fair business competition, increased welfare for the needy Americans, and with this third-party platform, he starts to gain notoriety and attention. On October 12, 1912, minutes before a campaign speech in Milwaukee, Roosevelt is going to be shot at close range by an anarchist, John Schrank. Schrank, who was immediately detained, offered that his motive was any man looking for a third party or a third term ought to be shot. So he says that no president has ever taken a third term, and anybody who tries should be shot. So this John Schrank shoots Roosevelt at close range. Roosevelt only suffered a flesh wound from the attack, goes on to deliver his speech as scheduled without any recognition that anything was wrong. In that speech, he says, you see, it takes more than a bullet to kill a bull moose. And that's where the term Bull Moose Party comes from. Shortly after that, he's going to be rushed into the hospital, and he is going to seek treatment for that bullet wound. But still, he gets up, gives a speech. Of course, he's going to come up with the term bull moose. And this is another third party that we see gaining some recognition here. Woodrow Wilson is going to run for the Democrats with the support of William Jennings Bryan. We remember him from the Populist Party. Because of what was happening with the Republican Party votes being split between Roosevelt and Taft, Wilson is going to squeak by, and he is going to win the presidency. Wilson is going to run on the program of New Freedom. He's going to say that he demands the government take control of corporations to benefit small business. He wants to go on the triple wall of attack of privilege. He wants to go after the trusts, the banks, and the tariffs. So Wilson, because of how clear he is in this message, because he says, this is what we are running for, this is who I'm going to help, although Roosevelt does have a lot of the same ideologies and what he would do as president, Wilson is going to sweep the vote, receive 4 times the vote in the Electoral College as Taft and Roosevelt, because it really just became this personal attack between Taft and Roosevelt. And when Taft went into the presidency and was siding with big business with the tariff, ruining the legacy of Roosevelt, he really brought down both candidates and made it nearly impossible for Roosevelt to rise above this political squabble between the two of them. And Wilson is going to come out on top. Now, as president, Wilson is going to live up to his promises, and he is going to go after the tariff by passing the Underwood Simmons Act, which reduced the tariff. He is going to pass the Federal Reserve Act, allowing for a more flexible currency. The Federal Reserve actually controls the flow of money, the printing of money, the currency, the money supply in the United States. And that really speaks to William Jennings Bryan moving away from that gold standard, giving more trust in the government to trust our currency, not necessarily having it backed in hard currency. And the Federal Reserve allows for a little bit more flexibility there. Woodrow Wilson is also going to go after the trusts as he promised with the Clayton Antitrust Act, which will be passed in 1914. And Woodrow Wilson takes the stance that all trusts are bad. There is no good trust, there is no good monopoly. And the Clayton Antitrust Act will crack down on all monopolistic activity, stating that there can be none. It makes it illegal to form a monopoly in any way, shape, or form. The Clayton Antitrust Act also pushes to support unions. Wilson is going to be reelected in 1916 because we are on the brink of the First World War, which we will talk about as we get closer. But know that his actions within the United States on social reform allows the people to trust him when it comes to foreign affairs, and they want to keep him as our leader moving into that conflict. So, why is any of this important? Why do we look at the progressives? And the reason being is because now we're starting to see pieces come together that show us our current day government, our current day society, our current day economy. And the legacy of the progressives begin the protection of the people from the government. Now, there is a long debate that we could have on how much government is enough government. But without the Progressive Party, we would have never seen the government interference in the economy for the people, supporting the people. While this isn't huge reform for the government helping the average person day to day, it was at the time. Having any government interference to set regulations for the working class was a huge change. And that's where we start to see this budding relationship between the government and its citizens. How can the federal government protect and serve its citizens on a day to day basis? Consumer protection is began by the progressives and is long lasting. It still remains today. Protection from big business for the consumer, setting the idea that you can't price gouge people, setting the idea that there needs to be safety standards not only within the factory but on the product as well. So you see the government saying, okay, we need to monitor business because they are not looking out for the average consumer. They are looking out for their pocketbook. And we, the government, that is our job to make sure the consumer is taken care of. Another legacy of the Progressive Party is the participation of the people, getting the citizens to participate more directly in their government, seeing the direct election of senators, the idea that people will know who the president is, choose a president that sides with their ideas, the use of initiative, referendum, recall, getting women to participate in the government. So this increase of the people, the average person, not just the wealthy, in the government as well. And the question then becomes at the end of the progressive era, and we'll explore this a little bit more in class this week, is government intervention and the necessity of government intervention over time through different events in our history. And without the Progressive Party, we wouldn't have started that relationship of government intervention at all. And we'll explore that idea more as we meet this week. Just a quick reminder, I won't go into this again because I explained this at the top of the lecture, but know that your assignments due this week. You have your Journal 17, you have the Progressive Presidents document, your short paper is also due this week, and your unit exam with 40 multiple choice and 2 short answer questions will be posted on Friday. Any questions regarding this week or what's in the lecture, please let me know.